Today's show is brought to you by KegConnection.com. Purchase all of your homebrewing supplies and draft beer equipment with everyday low pricing and everyday $7.95 flat rate shipping at KegConnection.com. Like the brand new True to Style recipe kit, a delicious German Weiss beer. It, along with every other True to Style recipe, is on sale right now for 25% off at KegConnection.com. Go to KegConnection.com, use the promo code HHH, and you'll receive 5% off your order.
Entertaining shows with content that spreads information and sparks discourse throughout the community. This is the Pearl Media Network.
Hey, welcome to the Homebrew Happy Hour. This is the show where we supply the answers to your homebrewing questions and discuss all things related to craft beer. If you have a question you'd like us to discuss on a future episode, visit homebrewhappyhour.com and click on the submit a question link at the top of the page, or now you can call or text them in by using 325-305-6107. I am your host, Joshua Stubing. Today I'm joined by the Director of Operations at cmbecker.com, Mr. James Carlson, as well as the President and Chief Keg Washer at kegconnection.com, Mr. Todd Burns. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me today. Oh, hey, the camera was moving around because you were talking, but I still had you muted. Hey, let me try that again. Thanks for joining me today.
It's good to be here. You know, I was just about to ask you if you still had us muted because I didn't see you unmuted. So,
yeah.
Now, one of these days, I swear he's going to do a whole show and just mute us the whole time.
Yeah, no, not.
I've been through that.
James has. Oh, low blow, man. I know it wasn't aimed at me, but that was a low blow. It's true. Well, you weren't muted. You just weren't recording. I've almost done that. Actually, the last time I did something similar to that, Todd and I, we were recording a video, which is publishing as you are consuming this show. You can also go consume this video on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/homebrew happy hour. I'll get the little, look at that bumper right there that says it. If you're watching the video, have these nice bumpers I can queue up. Anyway, we shot a video on what today's topic is, managing foam on your home draft beer system. And Todd was in like, we break every video up into segments, and we were like on the third or fourth segment, and he went all the way. He was 3/4 of the way done with this segment, and I said, "Oh crap!" And he was in the middle of talking, and he goes, as the diva talent he is, he looked at me and he goes, "I wasn't done yet," and I said, "Well, I didn't record any of that audio." And the audio on the camera sucks, right? It wouldn't have worked. So I was like, we gotta redo it, man. And thankfully you were understanding that day. You're not always so understanding. I have to wear makeup sometimes.
Oh yeah, I'm always understanding with you.
Cover the bruises.
Yeah, thank you. It is a rough life being under Todd Burns, and that has a lot of connotation to it. But anyway, I've been up a couple times to headquarters the last 2 weeks. This last time I came up mainly because I'm trying to get my schedule in line to where James can start hanging out with us on Monday nights.
I got to do that Monday, and I enjoyed it.
Yeah, he's trying to coordinate our drinking. I love that.
Yeah. I don't have a problem. We every time my schedule, sometimes holidays will throw it off or whatever, and whatever the last time that threw me off for. James, when's the last time you were able to hang out with us? It's been like 5 months that I've been on that other schedule.
Oh, gosh. I think I can't even remember the last time we all were able to get together. It's been at least a year.
Okay. So,
I still think that after the experience, you should come up every week. I mean, it really is helpful for you to be here every week.
I set a day. I hate the precedence I set when I'm up there because we're super productive. Todd and I are super productive when we're in person together. And I'm still reasonably productive when I'm not near him. But it's a dangerous precedence to set for sure. But yeah, James had to hang out with us. There was still, thank God, knock on wood, all the above. There was enough Kolsch to get us through the night.
Yes.
Our audience has made plenty of comments this week because Monday I was posting on our Instagram and our Facebook, and like by the 5th picture, they're like, "Is that another Kolsch?" And I was like, "Hey, don't you?"
I know you do. I mean, I had 6 beers on tap, and you didn't even try anything else. So what?
I know.
Come on.
Come on. I'm a man who finds, like, ask my wife, one of my most annoying qualities, and I say most because there's plenty, but one of my most is like, we'll go to a drive-through at any given insert fast food restaurant here, and she gets so peeved at how mad I get at her for not knowing what she wants right when we get up to
Sure.
But here's my logic. Well, first off, I know what I want. It's the reason I'm going through the drive-through. You don't go through a drive-through to look at the menu. Like, your drive-through is to get in and get out. You're going quick. People got places to be. Otherwise, they get out of their car or they're morbidly obese. But those aren't necessarily mutually exclusive. But
And let's face it, morbidly obese people usually know what they want in a drive-thru.
Thank you. Exactly. Because that's where they go all the time for food. So we're at like a cabana and we always get the same thing. But I was like, I'm about to order. And she goes, "No, I don't know what I want yet." I said, we've just been in line for 15 minutes behind cars. You couldn't think about what Mexican, food you wanted. It bothers her so much. But yeah, with beer, with Kolsch, I know what I like, man. When you have
I understand.
And James, I'm glad to be able to announce. I think Todd and I misspoke on another episode that you weren't on. That you pitched the yeast, or you threw out the yeast after using it on this 4th batch.
Well, that's because that's what I told you guys I was going to do, and I just couldn't bring myself to do it.
So now we're going for batch 5. Huh?
Batch 5. Yep, we're going to stretch it.
I'm looking forward to it because I don't think I admitted it on the show, and I was way more embarrassed than maybe I should be when it was in the conical. It was very fresh, very young, and it was early in the morning, to be fair, but you were like, hey, give it a try. And I was like, I thought it was the Weiss beer for some reason. I'm an idiot, I admit. That's why I'm bringing it up while we're recording. Actually, jokes on y'all, I'm not recording right now. I'm editing this out. But I was like, "Oh, is that the Weiss beer?" Like, you looked at me like I couldn't have said anything more stupid in my life. You're like, no, man, that's the 4th generation of the Kolsch. And I was like, "Oh yeah, okay, I get that now." And I didn't. I was like in my head thinking, "Oh man, what am I missing?" I come back another couple weeks later and I tried it again and I was like, "Oh my God, no, this is your Kolsch." She goes, "Dude, it's the same beer."
Yeah, it's the same one.
And then when it gets to Todd's house and is actually on the kegerator and I try it again, I was like, "This is perfection. This is like Peter's Kolsch. Like, how did y'all get a keg of this?" You're like, "Dude, it's the same
stuff."
Yeah.
Well, you know what? I'd had an idea that maybe if it turns out as good as the last batch, maybe that's what we take to HomebrewCon.
We could do that. Absolutely.
That way, everybody that listens to the show can come up and say, "Give me that 5th pitch Kolsch." So
perfect. They could be the judge.
You're just pushing it until it fills, aren't you? You're just not going to give up. You're going to push it till it, and then you're going to be all pissed. You're going to be like, "Damn it! It tastes like crap." And I spent 8 hours brewing this 15 gallons of beer. But you really want to know how long you can take.
I do, yeah. Because think about all the people, and I'm one of them, that don't like spending a lot of money on fermentables. Which, to be honest, I don't spend a lot right now. I haven't for a while. Thank you, Todd. But back when I remember when I was brewing, Todd, you're for one. You would go pick up the stuff for us, and it was a lot of money when we do a batch of beer, and it didn't turn out good. So. If you can save money on yeast, why not?
No, I understand that. Although I'm not sure that I want everybody to do that, but yeah,
yeah, exactly.
So hey, I want to. Can I take us a totally different direction for a second?
Yeah, and I want to point out, and we're both bouncing at the same time. I noticed you're bouncing into the desk though, because you're
this is great. Yeah,
go ahead.
Anyway, I did some testing this morning, and I think it might be interesting. It was very interesting to me, but I realize that may not be interesting to everybody on some regulators. So we had 3 different brands of regulators, and I tested all 3 different brands. And I've been testing regulators for many years, and I've kind of got the test down. But I found something today I thought was fascinating, and I think we should do a show on it, or maybe do a write-up on it. What I found was that the 3 tests that I used, one of them was basically putting the regulator where you want it and then turning the valve on and off. The other one was adjusting it where you want it, turning the valve on and off until it stayed in the same place. And then the third one was having gas going in through a hose into a keg and actually pulling pressure off the regulator and having it catch up from going into a keg. I don't know if that makes sense, but in other words, I'm pulling the pressure relief valve on the keg, stopping it, and then it's below pressure, so the regulators bringing it back up to 10 psi. And I guess the thing that I was just shocked on was each two of the three regulators failed on totally different tests. And one of the things that made me realize is that people may be out there checking a regulator to see if it's working right, and in the end, what they're doing to see if it's working right maybe doesn't even matter, because the regulator functioned completely different in the real world experience of filling up the keg. That's with CO2, not with beer, of course. So that's it in a nutshell. But I think dragging that out a little bit more and explaining each section of it and how it worked might be helpful for people when they're setting up their draft beer systems.
Oh, I agree. And I got to watch, because you shot it with your phone, which, by the way, I'm glad you got your new phone, and that camera on that phone's really nice.
It was kind of bouncing around because I was doing everything and holding my own phone in the other hand at the same time. But for the purpose of the test, it was fine because we're just sending it to some vendors. But yeah.
Right. But I watched all of them because we're going to compile them to send. I was really interested at the results, and like you said, it's interesting to see how they react in the different, like you said, in the different stress tests that you were doing on them. I think people would be real interested, because one question that you get on the retail side of things a lot is especially people who are brand new. Why do I care about the regulator so much? And the regulator is a pretty core component of your draft system that can make or break your draft experience. Agree?
Well, yeah, and especially it can really ruin it, because the most common thing that we see with being inexpensive in it itself isn't necessarily a bad thing, right, James?
That's right.
But a cheaply made regulator or a poorly made regulator is that they may work in the very beginning somewhat, or you may be able to get them to adjust right, but in the real world experience, they start to shoot up in pressure. They'll tend to what we call creep up, and what can happen is you can get everything set right, you're serving your beer, and then within 8 hours a day, that sucker has creeped up to 25 psi, and maybe you haven't ruined your beer, but you've overcarbonated. And it's actually going to go right into what we're talking about today, which is foam. You've overcarbonated your beer to the point where it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of energy to bring it back down. And James and I can both tell you that we've done that before. We've overcarbonated a beer.
Yeah, in fact, we had one at the trade show one year that was way overcarbed.
Yeah.
And we were having to every 10, 15 minutes shake it and pull the pressure off of it and shake it, and try to get it to where we could just serve it, because it was impossible to serve.
And that just puts us right into our discussion today, right?
Yeah, I was just saying that was behind the scenes knowledge, James. Don't lift the veil that much, okay? We don't want them to know how the sausage is made, or what? Is that the same?
Yeah.
Okay, I just feel.
Not everybody wants to see how the sausage is made. They don't want to see the eyelids going in there.
No, they're all saying, "I've been there. I've done that. I'm glad I'm not the only one."
You're right. I like to hide that, though. Like, again, I go back and forth between listeners believing that I'm an idiot because I am an idiot, or because it's my shtick. But there's some like Venn diagram that I fit in with all those beliefs about me. But anyway. Before we move on, you were talking about taking the Kolsch, the 5th generation Kolsch, to HomebrewCon. This is just my weekly reminder till the show that registration is open at HomebrewCon. I don't get paid to say that. We just hope that we see you there in Providence, Rhode Island, June. I think it's the 27th through the 29th. We don't have booth numbers out yet. AHA, we love them to death. They're very casual. We'll know at least the day of the show, so we'll tell you guys. But when we get our booth number, we'll let you know, and we really hope that you can come. We're about to have in 1 or 2 weeks, once we have the booth number established, we will put out a sign up sheet for you to sign up if you're going to be there to get the swag that we have for Homebrew Happy Hour and Homebrew Supply at the show. It's just a way to make sure we bring enough, because last year we had, Todd, how many people from just the podcast do we have sign up for shirts? Like 280.
It was a lot. Yeah, it was a lot of people.
It was a lot.
It was pretty fun.
It was a ton of fun. We had it was well over 200, and then we gave away all the other shirts that we had anyway. I think people just like free shirts, but if you're still wearing them, hey, send me a picture. I'd like that. But go to HomebrewCon, come see us, drink the famous alt beer and the famous Kolsch.
Don't curse me, man. Drink a alt beer. How about that?
It may be the infamous alt beer. We just don't know yet.
We're gonna go, man. I can't believe they hyped that up.
I love it. I love James Under Pressure is my favorite James.
Yeah. But just keep tightening those screws, Josh. Tighten those screws a little more.
Like I mentioned at the top of the show, today's episode is about managing foam, and it stemmed because a longtime listener of our show, Chris B. I won't use your last name because I don't know if you care, but he wrote to Todd, and first I'm a little offended you didn't copy me on it, Chris. But Todd, he wrote into Todd, and here's his email, and we'll go from there. So Chris wrote in, he said, "Hey, good morning, Todd. I'd like to start by saying I love the podcast. You guys have great content, and you guys are the reason I decided to get into kegging and order my equipment from you. The issue I'm having is unrelenting foam coming out of my keg. A few months ago, I purchased a 2-keg Pit in a Tap kit with the Taprite dual regulator. The first beer I put on was shooting foam out of the Pit in a Tap like a fire hose. When I purged the CO2 out, I could get it to post fairly normal. Or I pour fairly normal, I think. Before kegging a second beer, I bought the CMB Flow Control Party Taps to help resolve this issue. The second beer was kegged in the second keg on the second regulator that I had not used yet. This side has been used twice, and the beer has poured perfect both times. But the first one, on the other hand, even after switching to flow control, still pours foam. I've tried turning the PSI down and making sure all the connections are tight, but nothing seems to help. Any advice, insight, troubleshooting you could throw my way would be greatly appreciated." Now, Todd, this was a couple of weeks ago, and you had replied. I think you got it resolved with him, but we after that email, you forwarded it to me. After I got over my butthurt about Chris not wanting to write out to me, I asked you. I said, "Oh, that's great," and then you had said we should do a video and an article and talk about it on the show, because this is like numero uno, and people and I'm surprised we've done episode on like flow control faucets, but we haven't talked about, like, there are 3 main areas of troubleshooting in regards to resolving a foamy draft system. So I'm going to let you take it away, because you are the expert on this, and I yield to your knowledge.
Okay. Well, the first thing is temperature. Temperature is the most important variable, but there are 3 variables, and they all play together, I would say. So you've got temperature, you have restriction, and then you have the actual carbonation level of the beer. Those 3 things are the issue, or related to the issue almost every time. The reason I keep saying temperature is that even if you have another issue, it's a lot of times it's still related to temperature. So I really harp on temperature. Beer needs to be about 36 to 38 degrees. I tend to kind of go towards the 36 when it's in the kegerator, because it's always going to get a little warmer as it goes through the system. Even if you have a tower that has forced air going into it, or another system, shanks coming directly out of a keezer, you're always going to get some warming up when it hits the glass and everything else, because what you're shooting for is about 38 degrees in the glass. I think it's very important when you're trying to determine either whether you have a foam issue or you're trying to avoid a foam issue in the first place, is your temperature in your keg, gerator, keezer, whatever you're using to bring the beer out of, is important. But what's really important is what's the temperature of that beer when it hits a glass. So I recommend that everybody has a small thermometer we sell one. I think it's around $5, but you can kind of get one anywhere. They call it a lot of people call it a pocket thermometer, and actually you can calibrate it. The way to I'm going off to the side, but the way you calibrate these is you fill a glass completely full of ice where it's just jammed in there, and then you pour enough water in so it comes to the top. Put the thermometer in there, really agitate it hard, and that should theoretically get your water to 32 degrees. And then you use the little nut at the bottom to calibrate it, because you got to make sure your temperature is calibrated and you have a correct temperature. And then you want to make sure that that beer is at least 38 degrees pouring into the glass. So now that we've have a baseline, you can always determine if temperature might be your issue by checking the temperature of that beer in the glass. One of the things that I've seen with kegerators, keezers, other things is you will have temperature variations within the box. Those obviously are worse the more you open and close the box. So, if you have the box closed for a week, you're probably not going to have a lot of temperature variations, but you still could. If you've got coils in the back of the keezer, you may have a little bit different temperature in the very front and the very top than you do right where those coils are. So that's the reason it's not very accurate. The other thing a lot of people do, if you've got one of the ones that actually shoot a laser beam, is you can shoot it right on the keg, and that gives you an idea of what the keg temperature is. So again, you want to try to keep that temperature around where it is. Now, the other solution that some people have for controlling foam from a temperature standpoint is they go to the extreme. And you'll see a lot of bars do this. They'll serve a beer at, say, below freezing. That's also, people want an ice cold beer and they like the idea of an ice cold beer. So they'll put it at, there's bars that serve beers at 28 degrees. The issue with that is you don't get any foam, which means you don't get any head at all. And most of us like a little bit of head on our beer. The other thing is you really can't taste that beer. So if you can try this, well, I don't know if you want to try it, but we've tried it not because we wanted to, because we were actually in a bar where the beer was being served at 28 degrees. We could order an IPA and you could order a Bud Light, and you could really, when you tasted them, if you closed your eyes and tasted them, you couldn't tell the difference in them if they're really at 28 degrees, because it's so cold your taste buds just can't differentiate. So you can definitely get the beer too cold, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So the other thing is, and I can go over these other ones a lot faster, is the restriction on the actual beer makes a huge difference. And what is restriction? Restriction is just, the best way I could describe it would be a garden hose. If you have a garden hose that's very, very small, or you put one of those ends on it that you can open and close, you'll notice that it shoots out a lot further or shoots out a lot less depending on how much volume you have versus how much it's restricted. Well, beer's the same way, except maybe that wasn't the best analogy. When you do it at the very end, it doesn't work because you're compressing it down at the end. What matters is if you have a very restricted hose, a very small internal diameter hose, the beer traveling, the longer it travels through that really restricted hose, the slower it's going to be when it comes out the other end. And by coming out slower, it's not going to be as volatile and you're not going to have as much foam. So the restriction is basically, in the United States and most bars, is restricted by the internal diameter of the hose, the type of hose, and the length of the hose. In Europe and most other parts of the world, it's restricted by actually adjusting it, the restriction level on a flow control faucet at the end. So the last thing is the carbonation level of the beer. A good example, I think everybody in our industry likes to use, is Coors Light. Coors Light, for some reason, is a highly carbonated beer. It's like 16 psi. It's like a Belgian beer. Is also like the same way. But you can look at a beer like an English beer that may be carbonated at say 8 psi, as low as 8 psi. So I was talking about it being a correlation between all these things, and I think that the best analogy or example you could use of that is that English beer. Why is an English beer carbonated at 8 psi? Do you have any idea, Josh?
Well, I mean, did you not see me? I was trying to drink my coffee while you were going on. Why would you? What does this have to be? Why is an English beer here? You know what? I don't have to pretend for this part. Why is an English beer carbonated at 8 psi?
So, and English beers typically were served warmer. They served them out of a cask. They served them out of a basement, and they were served warm. If you highly carbonate a beer and serve it warm, it is going to foam like crazy. So the English would purposely undercarbonate their beers, or they probably wouldn't call it undercarbonated. They'd call it
perfectly carbonated.
Perfectly carbonated. They would have a lesser carbonated beer because they were serving it warmer, and then it would tend to foam less because when they served it, because of the fact that it was carbonated less. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is that all three of these things work together in unison to pour a perfect beer with a perfect head.
Yeah, it does make sense. And starting at point one with temperature, I know like James specifically, especially during the brew process, you're a real stickler on temperature for cold conditioning. Also, but during the brew day, hitting temps, we all know that's super important. What are good practices people can do for their beer and temperature? Is there that like dialing in your kegerator at a certain degree and not opening the door so much on days you're drafting? What are, cold conditioning or when you're secondarying, is it better at a certain temperature when you then transfer to a keg? Does that help with the integrity of the beer? I mean, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's real important because it's first of all, and Todd can agree with me on this, when it's colder, it's easier to transfer because all the stuff doesn't get disturbed in the wort. I always transfer. If I'm going to transfer into secondary, I always transfer it cold.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it helps a lot. So I get the other thing too is, I'm not sure. Did I lose you for a second there?
No, we're all here.
Oh, there you are. Okay. The other thing I was going to say is, after all that explanation, the real question in the end is my keg's foaming and or my kegerator's foaming, and I don't know why. So how do you troubleshoot all of that? And the way you troubleshoot that is you have to check each one of those things, starting with temperature, looking at the carbonation level of your beer, and of course looking at what you're using to restrict it. If you have the proper length of hose and you're using a flow control and you know that your restriction's working properly, then you work on those other two things. I just want to mention that a lot of people, just like on everything else, James, you work on cars a lot. A lot of times when something's wrong with somebody's car, they automatically assume that it's the worst, most complicated thing in the world. And it's usually like the battery, right? I mean, it's
right.
A lot of times it's the absolute simplest thing.
Yeah, it's like the movie Sling Blade, the mower won't run, it won't run, and then he goes over there, looks at it, and says it's out of gas.
Yeah,
so something that simple.
Yeah,
French fried taters or something.
French fried taters.
That's right. So the thing to look at with the draft beer system is these three things, and always try to get these three things in balance, and then start looking for other reasons, because there are other reasons. But I'm going to tell you, it's temperature about 80+% of the time, or restriction is a fairly common one. Beers are rarely over-carbonated. I mean, I guess I shouldn't say they're rarely over-carbonated. If you over-carbonated your beer, you can usually determine that pretty quickly, because you pour a little bit, it foams like crazy, but you taste it and you can tell by tasting it that it's way over-carbonated. So that's usually a pretty simple one. The other things that you can run into are obstructions in your line. One of the things I've seen with homebrewers is the little dip tube is in there too tight, and it's actually pushing hard against one of the sides. There's a little, every keg is different. Not every keg, but the different brands of kegs handle this differently. But some of them have a circle in the center that's a little bit lower. Some have it on the side. You got to make sure that dip tube is down in there and it's not pressing. It's up against the side, and that can cause foam. I've seen obstructions inside of a beer shank. But again, everybody just kind of assumes they've got some major issue, and they're always looking for that, issue that's not really there. It's really one of these three things.
So let's, like I said with the temperature thing, let's do some quick troubleshooting just for listeners who found this either through Google searching or because we referred them. On the restriction side of things, you kind of vaguely said if you are using the proper amount of hose. What is the rule of thumb, Todd, when implementing a draft system for hose, whether it be length, diameter, all of the above? What are your standards that get your seal of approval?
So if you take any class on this subject, and James and I have both attended a pretty major class on it,
Yep.
they will tell you that the industry standard is 4.5 feet of 3/16 ID beer hose. Everybody always just moves that up to 5 because, I mean, if you do the math on it, it's 4.5, but everybody uses 5. So everybody uses 5 feet of 3/16 ID beer hose. There are people out there shaking their head no right now all over the audience because there's a lot of people say, no, you need 7 feet, you need 10 feet, you need 15 feet. If you don't believe this, go to our website and pull up any keg kit, and it gives you the option of 5 feet, 7 feet, 10 feet, or 15 feet because everybody has a different idea. And it really does fix it if you put 15 feet of hose on there. I mean, it's not wrong. It will fix the problem a lot of times, even though the problem wasn't restriction. The problem was temperature. But even if you have a beer that's too warm and you restrict it way over restricted, it's not going to foam. So, what I mean by balance is, and to answer your question, is 5 foot 3/16 ID beer hose should be the proper amount of hose and the proper amount of restriction for a beer system.
Or if you're fancy, and here's sales pitch Joshua for you guys. I would be remiss if I didn't bring it up with James on the show. Look, flow control is the future, my friends. What changes about those lines, James, when someone does plunge into the world of a CM Becker flow control faucet?
Well, immediately what you got to remember is flow control balances at the faucet. So you got to remember that you have larger ID hose for that faucet. If you're trying to run 3/16, you're not going to get any results out of a flow control faucet because it needs higher ID size for that liquid for it to balance properly.
So what you're going to get is you will control your foam, but your beer is going to pour very, very slow. If you're double restricting, it's just like putting that 15-foot piece of hose on there. You're going to get a beer that's just trickling out of the faucet, and nobody got time for that, right, James?
Right.
Ain't nobody got time for that. There's a tower that we had found there at headquarters that is going to make its way on the site, but I think I'm going to buy one anyway just because I want it, because it is a T tower for 3 faucets, but you could plug any of those faucet holes in and use it for 2, and it's a standard tower size that will go on like the kegerator my dad has, and I say that because I want to put flow control. That's my next project on that kegerator is putting.
You don't have flow control?
No,
James,
no.
Can you imagine having a kegerator without flow control?
I don't have flow control either.
Oh,
I can't afford them.
I do not have. I've got 6 taps right now, and they are all CM Becker flow control. I do not try to restrict the beer line anymore.
I've seen
because
James,
with flow control, you've got that 5 foot to 15 foot of hose, the 5, 7, 10, and 15 foot of hose. I have all 3 on mine. I just turn a little knob depending on the conditions, and it changes it from 5 feet to 15 feet. If I need
yeah.
So.
They are nice.
I've seen James taps. I think you have a V3S. I think I've seen a V2G on there. I don't want to.
I've got, when we moved the company from DeSoto to Comanche, we had a bunch of old faucets in the backstock room, gold ones. Nobody wants gold faucets. So they were pre-V2G. So basically you're a V2G faucet, but gold.
Okay. Well, I think
they're kind of tacky. So I grabbed some of those. I gave my brother one because Michael was in the process of putting these in the trash can. I'm like, no, there's faucets. Don't throw them away. So that's how I ended up with two. I've got a V3S in the middle, and then I've got the old, I think they call them the XV faucets. I've got them on both sides.
Okay, I've seen them. Yeah, I have V2Gs on mine, but I have inline flow control. And before we wrap up,
so
this
you
segment,
do have flow control?
Well, no. On mine, on my Pops, we don't have any flow control.
Okay.
On mine, behind the green curtain here, because my office is filthy, I have V2Gs, but I have inline flow control, which for water has been wonderful as well. Flow control on highly carbonated sparkling water has been really good to have. I've appreciated it. And now that I have a keg of beer on there, which granted we're about to take with us to Easter, when we started brewing 10 gallons, I took 5 here, and we're going to leave 5 gallons at my dad's kegerator, and we're going to take this to Easter and see if my family can't float it. But the flow control, the inline on it works wonderful. I mean, obviously I shouldn't be surprised, but I was very grateful at how seamless I can go between beer and water, and the dial, I just have to adjust it a little. It's super convenient. The inline flow controls that I had bought were long enough ago where it has the actual little dial on it that you don't need the Allen wrench. But now they still come with a super convenient Allen wrench, so it's not hard to do.
Oh, we sell them both ways.
Oh,
yeah, they're available either way. Yeah, it's
see,
just an option. Yeah.
Look at me talking out of turn. I like the little dial thing that I just reach in.
That's what I like too. Yeah, because I'm not trying to secure it from anybody. Hey, James, we got to get flow control faucets on your system. I didn't know you didn't have flow control.
No,
as soon as this podcast over, we got to solve that problem.
The shanks have to pass through a wall, so that my shanks were that long. And I think when I first started, I had bought some from Keg Connection about 12 inches long, and they're stainless steel. And just those weren't flow control, and they were fairly expensive. So.
Yeah, well, we're going to solve that problem. I'm telling you.
Todd is a problem solver.
He definitely is.
All right.
Oh, we wouldn't be remiss without saying that we might possibly be brewing on his system tomorrow.
What?
Yep.
Oh, well, thanks for the invite, guys.
And we should also mention before we forget that although I rattled on for a long time about all this, it's actually a lot more concise and more helpful for troubleshooting if you use the written guide that we published or the podcast, maybe the written guide or the podcast. The written guide, I think, if you're really having trouble, would help a lot.
The video, you mean? We not just this podcast. We actually did a video that's much shorter than this episode, but it does go over it. And Todd has nice little his Vanna White moments of showing you lines and the differences between inner diameter and all that.
Maybe it's just a generational thing, but I think having that written document in front of you while you're working on it would be helpful.
It is available right now at kegconnection.com/blog. You'll see the growing amount of articles that Todd is writing. He's been on a kick lately writing articles about the most common questions. And the funny thing, it's not funny at all. It's kind of gross how much you enjoy doing it. You're like giddy like a scroll girl. You'll email me at like 9:30 p.m. like, hey, proofread this. I just wrote this today. And I'll be like, oh my God, what are you doing with your time, man? But anyway.
I do like solving problems, I think. I get a kick out of it. Yeah.
You do. You've injected your opinions into my life many times to problem solve. But anyway, that real quick, because I want to wrap up the third part of carbonation levels. Now, everyone who's listening to this, I assume, are brewing their own beer. Todd or James, I'll ask you first, because I know you've had your own self-doubts about your carbonation efforts. For a while there, I think Todd was giving you flack for over-carbonating, or was it under-carbonating?
Oh, no, it wasn't, because it was true. Yeah, I was over-carb. Yeah, absolutely, without a doubt.
How do you resolve that?
Drink wheat beer all the time. Well, what I do when I overcarb is I either just let it settle out with the lower pressure and let the carbonation go away over time, because it'll balance. Todd talks about balance. You can achieve that with CO2 in the liquid as well. If you're in a big hurry, you can shake the crap out of it and pull the depressor on the keg. We've all done that. The problem is it creates a lot of foam, and that foam kind of wants to come out of that airlock. So, I think the easiest way is just give it time. Decrease the pressure and let it settle out over time.
Yeah, so serve the beer. It's going to come out slow, but turn your pressure down to say 4 psi, and serve it like 4 psi. where you're bringing some of that beer out of the keg. And by doing that, you're obviously lowering the carbonation level because you're not replacing it with the higher carbonation. And then that, over time it will but don't do it too long or you'll have flat beer. So
yeah. And I've done that. And then you've got to turn around and do the exact opposite. You got to raise the pressure up and let it dissolve back into the liquid. So remember temperature. The reason why temperature is so important is the warmer it gets, the easier the CO2 comes out of suspension in the liquid. So that's another reason for flat beers. If they're if they're too warm and they're foaming, you end up serving a lot of head with flat beer.
Oh, and how many sporting events or concerts or even just bars do you go to and just weep a single tear when you watch that person, that bartender, pour 3 pints before they get it pour that they're willing to serve because it's not all just foam.
And they could solve it with a flow control faucet. And they're like, oh, those things are expensive. So I'm just going to sit here and pour $10 for the beer out so I don't have to buy more expensive.
Yeah, I mean, they could have bought a dozen flow control faucets for what they wasted in beer in a week. It just makes no sense.
Tell me how y'all really feel.
We have a strong opinion about it. We've been in bars maybe overconsumed and gone on and on about it.
Especially if you think about that one in DC where they had this really exotic beers on tap and you're watching the people pour half of that down the drain when they're serving beer, and it's hard to watch.
I remember, James, you had a word with our server. She was terribly nice, but it was World of Beer, wasn't it? That was where that was the first night we were in town. And it was like, hey, you got to do something about this. She's like, oh, I know, but I don't purchase. Or I forget the whole conversation that night was a little hazy. But you and Todd are my favorite to go out with after a couple of drinks in you. Y'all both will. I have fun with the conversations y'all bring up with the people. Because sometimes the bartender's just looking at, especially Todd. Todd's my favorite because a bartender, when they humor him, you can just see that look of I'm dying inside on their face.
How many times have I ended up back in the keg room? Oh God.
He doesn't just do it at bars after drinking. I one time met him at a hotel to have a meeting, a business work meeting. It was he was
back there working on the system, right?
And I walk in, I'm like, oh, where is Todd? Man, he's always late. And no, he wasn't late at all. He was in the back working on their draft system. And
I fixed it.
I've done the same thing. I was in Dallas at a bar. And the lady behind the bar was serving beer, and she was using one of our flow control with the creamer function, and she wasn't using it. So I actually ended up behind the bar serving beer, showing her how to use the faucet. And her manager coming by, and I thought he was going to throw me out, but he sat there, and I taught him how to do it too. So it was fun, it was enjoyable. And she had no idea that the faucet would do that.
You guys are bettering bars' lives one pour at a time. God bless y'all for the work you're doing. That wraps up today's show, guys. I appreciate y'all's time. I know it is the Easter weekend. If y'all do brew on the system tomorrow, James, I'm counting on you to take tons of photos.
Oh, absolutely.
So I can steal them.
Happy. We're going to do a lemon drop Pilsner.
Oh, you are going to do that after all.
So it's lemon drop hops, right, James?
Yep.
Yeah, I had a beer, and we both happened to have a beer around the same time. Mine was in Denver during the trade show, and then you tried the lemon drop Shiner that we had. We got some more of last night.
It was odd because you had just mentioned to me about it, and that day I went to the beer store and they had it, and I thought, well, I'm going to try it, and it's going to be.
It's a good hop.
Yeah,
very tasty hop. You're going to love it, Josh. You won't even want to touch the coals when we have it done.
Challenge accepted. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for joining me today, and I will catch you guys later. And that will do it for this episode of the Homebrew Happy Hour. If you have a question you'd like us to discuss on a future episode, visit homebrewhappyhour.com and click on the submit a question link at the top of the page. Or now you can call or text them in by using 325-305-6107. Thank you to our show sponsor, KegConnection.com, for supporting our podcast and the homebrewing community. Go to KegConnection.com, use the promo code HHH, and you'll get 5% off your order. That works on site-wide, guys. KegConnection.com, promo code HHH. On behalf of Todd Burns, James Carlson, and the Pearl Media Network, I'm Joshua Steubing. Thank you for listening.